When I worked in college campus ministry, it was not uncommon for us to have pastries, donuts, things like this at our weekly staff meetings, especially if it was someone's birthday or we're celebrating a special occasion or someone's just nice and they brought it in for all of us. And I have these fond memories of a coworker of mine who would always, he would take a donut and he'd cut it in half and he'd leave the half in the box with the others. And then he would eat that half of the donut. But inevitably, minutes later, he'd go back to that donut that was cut in half, and then he'd cut it in half again. He'd have this little tiny square. He'd take it, he'd eat it, and I'd laugh to myself because I thought, just take the whole donut. You know that you're going to eat the whole thing, right? And sure enough, he would. A few minutes would go by, and he would take that other little quarter piece of donut, and he would eat it. It's so funny, and I laugh to myself, like I said. But when you think about it, I mean, he was trying to be healthy. He was trying to, have some moderation and not eat the whole thing, But it's so hard when you have that taste of it or you indulge in it. It's like you can't stop. You have to have the whole thing. Well, there's similarities actually to this and our spiritual life. When we're faced with spiritual temptations or, thoughts that are not of God, thoughts that are damaging to us and lead us down a bad path, we can indulge that thought and then it's hard to get out of it. It's like you have to kind of stop the thought at the beginning. And that's something St. Ignatius of Loyola talks about, right? He says, he tells us that he believes and says that there is an evil spirit in the world that's trying to derail us and get us off track. So it's really important for us to think about this. And when we are faced with an initial thought or temptation or something, that we stop it at the beginning. I mean, there's many, many examples we could think about this in our life. I mean, one could be someone, if you think of someone who has been unfaithful to their spouse or their boyfriend or their girlfriend. It's not like someone wakes up one day and says, I'm gonna go cheat on my partner. No, it starts with usually thoughts. So the person, maybe they had an argument with their significant other that day, they're irritated already, and then there's this attractive person that they work with. They think about that, and then maybe that leads to actions where they start to kind of talk to that person more, and then maybe it turns into, hey, do you want to have coffee, innocently enough? So these thoughts lead to actions, and then eventually the infidelity happens, right? So it's kind of spirals, it snowballs into that. So what we want to do, St. Ignatius says, is we want to make sure we acknowledge the moment that the thought comes into our mind, so we can put an end to it at the beginning. So things like, another example that comes to mind, because I think we all struggle with things like jealousy. So if you have a thought, well, so-and-so has the perfect life, why can't I have that? This compare and despair kind of syndrome, I find like that it can be so harmful, because especially we can indulge it and we start again to go down this path. And so everything we start to think and have jealous feelings, and we see the world through a lens of jealousy, and this one thought spirals into that. So we want to really be sure that we catch that right away, we acknowledge it, and we put an end to it so we don't go down that path. Another thing that St. Ignatius tells us that can be helpful when we're faced with these kinds of, negative, damaging thoughts or temptations, is that we want to know our weaknesses. We all have them. We all have faults. This is part of what it means to be human, right? So you want to take stock and be aware, what are you more prone to? Are you more prone to caring about things like, money and prestige and what people think about you? Or maybe you're prone to thinking, negative things about yourself, like I'm no good, nobody likes me, this negative kind of self-talk. Or maybe it's just a recognition that, hey, when I'm not around other people and I get lonely, I start to really have a lot of negative thoughts and I get in a bad place. Whatever this is, we want to take stock of it. We want to be aware. So again, we can be prepared and we can put an end to it when it happens, when we feel like we have these negative feelings, okay? And then the last thing that St. Ignatius says is that when we're going through a spiritual, temptation, or we have these kind of dark thoughts that are leading us in bad places, we don't want to stay silent about it. Okay, the evil spirit wants us to stay silent and bear the burden alone and by ourselves. Why? Well, because the evil spirit knows we're going to snowball. We're going to get stuck in this place of discouragement. Right? So it's so important then that if we're going through this, that we talk to trusted friends, to mentors or spiritual advisors, people that we trust, that we know, will offer good counsel and will keep things in confidence. It's so important. Don't let shame, embarrassment, fear of what someone's going to think about you prevent you from telling someone these things so that you can get the help that you need. So those are some things for us, hopefully, that can help when we're faced in this kind of tough situations, when our thoughts are going away we don't want them to go, and that could lead us down a bad path. So as always, what we'll do now, we'll take some time for reflection, and we'll have a little music and some questions. And so I invite you to kind of calm your hearts and get comfortable. If you have a journal, maybe you want to journal with this. And we'll take some time to pray and reflect. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. Victory is ours. Victory is ours through Him who loved us. Victory is ours. Victory is ours through Him who loved us. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. Victory is ours. Victory is ours through Him who loved us. Victory is ours. Victory is ours through Him who loved us. Merciful One, you know us better than we know ourselves, and you love us with all of our flaws and imperfections. Give us strength when we are tempted to turn away from you, and grant us wisdom to make choices that lead us toward light, not darkness. Bless us this day and in the week ahead. Amen.